What's up, agency owners? Jason Swenk here. Have another amazing guest, and we're going to talk about the perfect close. And this guy's literally wrote in the book on the perfect close. And let's go ahead and get it in the episode. Hey, James, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you, Jason.
Yeah. So, for the people that have not heard of you, tell us who you are and what do you do?
Well, I am the CRO of a holding company, but most people know me for my book on closing, which I mentioned is called The Perfect Close. It's actually the best-selling book on closing on Amazon. Has been for since 20 anyway. So I'm very grateful for that. I think the thing that people like most about it is that it's just two questions. It's no pressure, 95% effective. And I know that sounds like an incredible claim, but hopefully we'll be sharing with your audience, basically the questions and everything. So I don't. There's no reason to hold anything back. I don't think.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about let's leading up to the close because there's probably a lot of I know I've closed $1 million deals and really big deals all the time. There's a lot of things that you have to do in order to lead up. What are some of those that you found in your experience?
So I think something that your audience will probably resonate with is on the whole, there's really four high leverage areas in sales. It's market, message, medium, and motivation. Those four. Market is your targeting. Okay. And so I had a lot of people, you think I had a client one time ask me, they said, "Hey, James, what is the single best thing I can do to improve sales?" And you might think as a guy who wrote a book on closing that my answer would be closing, but that's not the answer. The answer is what the data shows anyway, is that the single best thing you can do to improve sales is sell to only ideal clients. Out of all the things you can do, it's the single best thing. And there's lots of examples of this, and we can delve into that if you want. But targeting the right customer is most important because everything else is below that in the funnel. And so if you're trying to sell to the wrong person, all that other stuff, all of your demos, all of your presentations, all of your wonderful messaging, your great negotiation, all falls on deaf ears because you're not selling to the right people, right? So it is all by itself. Just targeting the right customer is a super high leverage strategy. So it's really the best thing. And then, of course, message is all right. Well, now that you figured out who the right person is, how do what's the thing you're going to say to them? Yeah, and there's quite a nuance, or there's quite an art to making sure that you're delivering the right message. Because what the data shows again is that once we do get somebody's attention, we have a really, really narrow window in order to get that message across to them. And so we just got to make sure that it's high impact. And that's an area we can go into about, what's the best way and how do you craft messaging. I know that's an area that you do delve in frequently, but and then medium is just, well, where do these people hang out at? So now we know who we're going to talk to, and I know what we're going to say when we talk to them. Well, where it is that they hang out, right? And basically, the rule that we all know: you meet the customer where they are, not where you are, not where you want them to be, but where they are. And then that's where we deliver our message. So social, great, is going to be on social. If it's going to be on some other channel, like some of my clients, their people don't hang out on social. They don't like electronic media, and so they have to go to trade shows in order to get the results that they're looking for. So, what drives the answer to that question, and what you're going to do is just where do your customers hang out? And then, of course, motivation is just about personal motivation, right? It's like if we won't work, then none of that stuff works, right? If we can't get ourselves out of bed and to do the things we know are most important. So anyway, I don't know if any one of those is a great line.
Well, let's talk about the
And none of those
messaging.
have to do with closing, but the short version was the single best thing you can do to improve sales is really just to target the right customers.
And I tell people that all day long. Like they're like, when I ask them their close rate and they go, "Oh, it's 20%." I'm like, "Whoa, that's bad." And they're like, "Oh, I thought that was good." Or they'll say 50%. I'm like, "That's still bad." And I'm like, "Are you talking to the right prospect?" I always followed, NBAT, need, budget, authority, and timing, in order to figure out I'm talking to the right people. But then now that we qualify and we're making sure we're talking to the right person, what's the messaging that you've seen work really well in order to set us up for that close?
Well, I'd love to take credit for this, but there's actually been some really great research on what makes for great messaging, and there is a high impact framework. Most of the research done in here is done by Corporate Visions is the name of the company, and they have got, I think, 3 or 4 different books. But just rapidly going through it, if you're trying to craft a message, uh, there's there's just 6 different elements. There's the driver or the trigger event. There's the issue or the problem the customer has or the goal they're trying to achieve, right? Those are slightly different. People try to move away from problems and they want to try to move towards goals or results. And then the research that they did the most at Corporate Visions is around insight, right, or unconsidered needs. And so we need to be able to introduce something about all of that dynamic and what they're trying to do that they didn't know before. And that's probably the most challenging part. Once you've done that, you can you can give them a value prop that is, or an outcome statement, how you can produce a result for them. And the natural reaction people have whenever you say any kind of, like if I say, hey, I can improve your close ratio by 20%, the natural outcome is skepticism. They're thinking, oh yeah, right, how do you do that? Right. And so they are primed at that moment for you to reveal your feature or your mechanism of action. It's your secret sauce. It's the thing that you do for the customer that produces the result. Okay. And then we back up that with proof. And there's lots of different kinds of proof, but the things that are the best is third-party validation, and that's because customers know that of all the things, getting third parties to validate the results that you produce is the hardest to fake. And so that's basically it, right? Is now when you're crafting the messaging, you don't necessarily follow that same order, but you usually start with the issue of the problem that the customer has, and then you work back to the drivers, then you create your insight, then your value prop, then your mechanism of action, and then we do all that with proof. But that is the mechanism that they discovered it was the most likely to get executive buyers to make a decision now and not wait. And I'm simplifying greatly, but it's phenomenal. It's worked for my clients and for myself. There's no messaging that will suddenly overwhelm people with persuasion and make them want to buy your stuff, guys. So the best thing you can do to help that problem is just to make sure that the message is getting delivered to the right target, which we already talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, and I found too in doing the messaging should not be focused on you. It should be focused on them and making them the center or the focal point rather than talking how good you are and what you guys do and all that kind of stuff. It's about asking the right questions. That's what I always found in sales. Like if you could ask the right questions, because it literally puts the attention back on them. I mean, I always use that analogy. Let's say you're at a trade show when we used to go to trade shows. And I came up to you and I said, James, I'm Jason. I'm the best agency advisor in the world, blah, 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 blah. Like that's all you hear after I said that. Versus if I came up and said, hey, James, why'd you come to the conference? What's the goal of the conference for you? Is there anybody I can connect you with or that you came to meet? Right? Like I'm asking questions and, they're going to portray me a lot better than if I just said how good I am.
100%, right? We need to remember that the hero of the story is the customer. We should be thinking of ourselves more as the guide, like Yoda, right, or Obi-Wan Kenobi, right, is for Luke Skywalker. That's our role. We're not the hero, and so when we make it about us, you're sending the wrong message to the customer, right? We need to get off of ourselves and the solution altogether, and just figure out what kind of results we can help the customer with. And starting the conversation about them is the way to do that. And you just continue that. Customers, by the way, are used to dysfunctional selling, so they will keep driving you towards the solution all the time and try to get you to prematurely present, even though you may not fully understand what it is that they're trying to do. So we have to be patient enough to be able to do a full discovery, have a complete understanding of what they're trying to do before we start trying to solve problems. And that seems to be a very challenging thing for most salespeople to do.
Exactly. Well, James, I think we've teased people enough. Let's go ahead and get into the real meat, so we can, get the numbers, for our clients where they can close a lot more. What are the two questions that can improve everybody's closing percentage?
Sure. So maybe before we tell them what the questions are, we should make just sort of a general observation, which is that before you go into any meeting, you should have a kind of an idea of what you want the outcome to be for this meeting, right? What do you want to happen as a result of this meeting with the customer, right? And what you should have is you should have an ideal advance and a couple of alternative advances. In case your audience isn't familiar with those terms, let me just tell you about Neil Rackham. Neil Rackham, he performed the largest sales study ever conducted. It involved over 35,000 face-to-face sales interactions. We learned a ton about selling from his research. And what Neil Rackham learned in all that, he ended up having to coin a couple of phrases. And one of those is that phrase I just used called an advance. And the simple definition of advance is just moving the sale forward in a little way. Okay. He created another term called a continuation, which is a situation where the sale's not dead, but it's not going anywhere either. And the reason he had to come up with these two terms is because what he discovered in all that research is that 9 out of 10 sales interactions don't end in a win or a lose. That's not what happens. Yeah. What happens in 9 out of 10 sales interactions is we either get an advance where the sale moves away or we get a continuation. Okay. So that's the reason that we want to prepare an ideal advance. That's the best possible outcome. And then we want to prepare a couple of alternate advances just in case our ideal advance turns out to be unrealistic for some reason. So a good way to think about that is just like it's having a backup plan. Okay. And if you've got that prepared, then you're ready to use the two questions. And the first question of the perfect close, and maybe to give your audience a little hope, by the way, is there's a company out there called Gong.io, and these guys do outbound call analytics and for large outbound call centers. And so they just basically analyze phone calls to figure out what's the best and optimal way to do things for any given company. And so they asked this question to themselves. They said, what's the best possible closing approach that there is? And after analyzing over 1 million calls, they determined that the perfect close, which I'm about to share with your audience, is hands down the best closing approach that there is. And that the top performers are using it about 3 times per hour. Okay. Probably, and that's awesome. That's good validation. So they know that what they're about to learn is going to work. The thing I like the best about it is that it's just very non-confrontational. A lot of folks are very, very concerned about acting pushy or coming off as a slimy salesperson, and yet this has none of that baggage with it. Okay, and it's also amazingly effective. So here they are. By the way, if you got a pen, this might be the time to write something down. Okay, so that the first question is, does it make sense for us to X? Okay, I'll say that again. Does it make sense for us to X? Where X is going to be your ideal advance. Okay, so let's just say we do like maybe website assessments or something like that. We might say, does it make sense for me to do an assessment for you or schedule an assessment so we can see what your best options are? Okay, in that example, the assessment is the X. Okay, now if you think about it, there's only one of two things they're going to say. They're either going to say yes or they're going to say no. Okay, if they say yes, awesome, right? It's time to schedule it. If they say no, then you're just going to use the second question. And that second question is some variation of, okay, wait for it. Okay, well, what do you think is a good next step then? And what I can tell you after hundreds and hundreds of ride-alongs is that what will happen in 90% of cases is the customer will suggest a very logical next step for where they're at in their buying process. Okay, and so they will advance the sale for you. Okay, so if again, first question, does it make sense for us to X? If they say yes, great, you got your advance. If you say no, you say, well, what do you think is a good next step? And then literally 90% of the time, they will suggest one. And guys, the rule is customers are always comfortable with their own next steps. Okay, and then we can just keep moving the pace forward. Now, you've got those other two alternate advances, right, that you prepared. So if it turns out that they can't think of anything because they're not used to this type of a sale, right? They don't have a lot of us. We sell things that people don't do much in their lives, maybe once or twice in a lifetime. So they really don't know a good step. So there's a little way to enhance what I just taught you. Is sort of the kindergarten version. We can upgrade that a little bit by using what's called the suggestion. And so we would say, other clients at this stage tend to do X. Does it make sense for us to do X? And in that sense, you're helping them understand what a logical next step is without being pushy about it. So if they say yes, sure, great. You've got two options, just another one. Or if they say no, you can say, all right, well, sometimes clients at this stage do this other thing. Does it make sense for us to do that? And then you would be just suggesting one of the other things you prepared. But the point is, you're going to walk out of your meeting always with some kind of advance happening. Okay. The funnest one is where you do the add-on. Right? So if they say, hey, we say, hey, does it make sense for us to do an assessment? They say, yeah, sure. Right. And you go, awesome. Yeah, and we could say the suggestion again. We can say, well, a lot of clients at this stage will sometimes also have us do this, right? They'll have our technical teams talk about the conversion or whatever, or the migration or whatever you want to, and they go, oh yeah, that's a good idea too. Great. Now I just got my second one. So look at your list. All right. Sometimes clients at this stage will want us to create a proposal. I think we've got everything proposal. Does it make sense for us to put together like a proposal for you? And they're like, yeah, sure. And so now we went from just one advance, we kept piling it on until we've matched the pace the client's ready to go. And that's the secret here, is that it lets us go faster if they want to go faster, but it lets us go slower if they want to go slower. Now, there's one more thing that you do at the end of the add-on, and that is that the add-on, instead of throwing the ball back to the customer and saying, well, what do you think is a good next step? What you say instead is you say, are there any other logical steps we should be considering right now? And what that will let the customer do is they can suggest any things, thoughts that they had, any ideas of how to move forward that maybe you didn't even consider. Right. And I did this one time with a group that I was working with in Arizona, and you'll never believe what the guy. So it sounded very similar to what I did. We went from doing we wanted in a demo with the executive team because that's who we thought was going to be making that decision. He says, yeah, that's great. We need everybody on board. And then I asked him, well, do we want to have our technical team talk about the conversion? He goes, yeah, my guys are worried about that. So we did that. And I said, I think we got enough for a preliminary proposal. Does it make sense for us to put something like that together for you? He goes, yeah, that'd be super helpful. And I just threw out that thing. I said, well, all right, what else we need to be thinking about right now? This guy says, he kind of looks around and he goes, James, is there any chance I can get a copy of your standard agreement? Because our legal people are slow. Right. And of course, on the inside,
I
I'm,
love
you know,
that when that happens.
yeah. I'm cool as a cucumber on on the outside because I'm like, hey man, of course I'd be happy to get you a copy of our standard agreement. But on the inside, I'm like, yeah, of course I can send you a contract. Are you kidding me? And the funniest thing about this one is we didn't even think we were presenting to the right people. That's why our ideal advance was to present to the executive team, right? So we never even dreamed that walking out of there, that maybe sending them a contract was a realistic expectation. We just didn't even think that was possible. Okay, so that's obviously the most fun of all the variations. But what makes either one of these work, guys, is just a little bit of thought before you walk into that meeting and think, okay, what's the best thing that could happen? And then what are a couple other things that we could do that would still keep the ball rolling? And then you're just going to use those two questions to either throttle it backwards or throttle it forwards, depending on what the customer is feeling. And then, again, by doing it this way, you're just pacing the sale at exactly the rate they're ready for. It's when you try to push a customer faster than they're ready for, that's when it starts to feel like manipulation. But by doing it this way, it's completely non-confrontational and very easy to do. You don't have to feel like you're being slimy. In fact, you're just facilitating a decision is all you're really doing.
Yeah,
So there you go. There's the secret in, 5 minutes or so.
Very easy. Some of the things that we always kind of staggered our offering. So we never went in for the kill right off the bat. So we went in for something simple like maybe a strategy session. And then what we did, because what we found is if we could go with the three outcomes with the strategy session, like one, they'll love the plan, they'll go do it themselves. Two, they'll love the plan, they'll want to do it with us, which is the most common. Three, they don't like the plan, we'll give your money back. So it takes away risk just for the initial, and it also qualifies people. And then when we would do the plan with them, and that was the secret that we did, at the very end, we'd ask two questions. Do you like the plan? And if they said yes, cool, then I'd go on to the second question. If they didn't like the plan, then we would recircle, what didn't you like about the plan? Redo a plan. And then I would come back to the last question, do you want our help? Right? But I like yours as well, of like, now I can kind of see, well, let's kind of put all this together. Mm-hmm. And make it all work and then layer it all together. Because that's what I love about frameworks. And I tell everybody that follow our framework, I'm like, look, it's a framework. You build on it. You don't have to do it exactly.
Right. So, and it works on the beginning. It really works at any stage of the sale, right? So if we haven't gotten to the point where they want us to create the plan, then we'd say, most customers at this stage will have us put together, we'll collaborate. Right? Does it make sense for us to collaborate on a plan together? And then we just, right? If they say yes, great. Then let's schedule a time, right, to do it. We're going to take that step. If not, one of the beautiful things about doing it this way is, and people miss this subtlety when you're teaching it for the first time. When you're teaching it the first time, they're worried about, well, what if the customer says no? But what have they really said no to? They didn't say no. I'm not going to do the analysis with you, or they didn't say no. I'm not going to do this this project with you. What they said is it didn't make sense right now. Okay, and so at its core, what we have a timing question, right, rather than a closing question. And so people don't really get that. But what that means is the customer can't reject your course of action. They can only reject the timing of it. But the best part is they can clearly see the direction that we're headed, right? And so haven't actually asked, like if that makes perfect sense to me, then they know the next thing you're going to do is get your calendar out and schedule something. But if they say no, they haven't said, no, I'm never going to do business with you. They've just said, no, it's not making sense. And then that means somehow we didn't understand clearly enough to time our question. And by the way, this is one of those questions where you can't get the timing wrong because it is a timing question. Right. So what I recommend that folks do when they're meeting with a customer is they just have a little agenda. It could be half a page or even. And the last, somewhere towards the bottom is action items and next steps. And that's where you're going to ask these questions that you just learned on this show. Is, does it make sense for us to, and then whatever your ideal advance is. So it's pretty, but I will say this, the way you're super facilitative, right? So I have no doubt that you have fantastic success with that. Just because it's when we try to push the customer or trap them, people have the wrong idea what selling is. They think it's about persuasion or something like that, when in reality, really, you're just facilitating a decision. So you're just trying to help them along in the process. And once you understand it that way, you can walk into the sale and the meeting with no pressure, right? You don't on yourself, right? You can just say, all right, how can I help this customer? And because you're just helping them make decisions. You really, hopefully the decision involves you, but guys, sometimes it will and sometimes it won't.
Awesome. Well, this has all been amazing, James. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you think would benefit the audience listening in?
Oh, I don't know. We covered quite a lot of ground, right? Just those four things that we talked about could make the difference for somebody who's listening to this show. So I hope it's been helpful. If people want to know more about the closing part of it, I think I even have something about the first four questions. So my website is puremuir.com. So people sometimes have hard times pronouncing my last name, Muir, Muir. And so I had to create a rhyme so that they could get it right on my website. So it's puremuir.com/resources. If you go there, there's a whole bundle. It's like a dozen different resources that includes all the models, like literally it's the first three chapters of the book, and all the models that actually have little diagrams that explain how the questions go. It's all free, right? So you don't have to.
Awesome.
Then you can decide if it's for you. So that's a great place to go get it. And there's also, I think those four. I did a presentation at Outbound that includes those four high leverage areas in it, and so you can get the slides. I think are also in that bundle. I used to have them all separate, but people were tired of downloading a dozen things, so I just put them all in one big bundle.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, James, for coming on the show. Make sure all of you guys go and check out the website, get the free resources. Make sure you check out James's book. And if you guys want to be around other amazing agency owners where we can see the things that you may not be able to see and help you on sales, marketing, operations, I want to invite all of you to go to digitalagencyelite.com. This is our exclusive mastermind for only agency owners. Go there now, and until next time, have a swank day.